Good morning, folks. This is Jason Bassini with IBM's Hybrid Cloud Sales Team, and welcome to this week's Integration and Development webcast. Now, today we are pleased to have Kim Clark, who is an integration architect with our offering management organization. And some of you may recall that Kim had led some sessions for us in the past, specifically around the role of messaging in a microservices architecture. And what we're going to be kicking off today is the first of a 5-part series. So this is going to be a little bit of a departure from the way in which we've traditionally structured these webcasts. But today will be the first part, and those sessions will bring us right up until, I believe, the Friday before Thanksgiving. So what we're going to be touching upon today is breaking up the ESB, and then we're going to be following on and going a little bit deeper into the subject of Agile integration architectures and talking about decentralizing integration, benefits of containerization, et cetera, as we move a bit further along. So what I've asked him to prepare today is around 20 minutes of content, and the end of that session will allow for some Q&A as well. And just a couple of reminders before I do hand things over to Kim. If you've got any questions, you can submit them at any point using the chat, and I'll be monitoring that throughout the presentation. And if you are looking for a copy of today's recording, just let me know, and I can be sure to send you a link that will allow you to download it directly from this WebEx account. So with that said, I'm going to hand things over to Kim. We can get things underway, and I think you're all going to get a tremendous amount of information out of today's session. So Kim, all yours.
Thanks, Jason. There's a bit of background noise at the moment. I don't know whether it's coming from your mic or somewhere else.
Let me see.
That's better. Okay, so I'll get us started there. So yeah, nice to be on the call with everyone. Integration architecture has changed dramatically in recent years, as has the application space. There are many things that are happening to affect how we build applications, so we can write more applications in a more effective and exploratory way, and that's affecting how we do integration as well. And I'm going to introduce this overall theme of integration agile architecture, and then this week dive into how it's affecting the pattern known as the enterprise service bus. And then in future weeks, we can start spining off from that in different tangents to see how it's affecting other areas of integration. What I'm describing is actually pretty well written up now. We've got a booklet that came out earlier this year, and it's a free online e-booklet that you can go to and look at the detail around this. And there's plenty of links in there to deeper material as well. This graphic you're seeing now is talking to a number of concepts at once around how integration architecture is changing. And it's really delving into things from a number of different perspectives. If we take a look at the themes that are really affecting integration architecture from the application space, we're seeing a need to be able to deploy things in a more fine-grained way to take advantage of scalability and agility capabilities. We're seeing a more decentralized ownership and generally a more decentralized organizational structures within enterprises. And of course, inevitably, underpinning a lot of this is the fact that people are able to and wanting to move to more cloud-native infrastructure. And in many cases, that means not just an infrastructure as a service, but actually containers and those more specific cloud-native capabilities. So let's delve into each one of those as an individual topic, first of all. Microservices in the application space has allowed people to break up applications into smaller pieces or build from scratch applications in smaller pieces. Those pieces being able to be changed more easily, so move at a much more agile pace as we deploy changes to an application. scale those parts of the application in a much more effective way to make good use of the infrastructure underneath it, and indeed to provide a greater resilience. So we can provide resilience on a function-by-function basis now, and when we are deploying functionality, be sure that we're not going to affect any other functionality because of the dividing lines between one container and the next. So microservices application, a huge topic, impossible to cover just in one slide, but really I think it's important to pick up from this that it's primarily about this idea of a more fine-grained agile deployment, enabling these benefits. But it is, it's a fresh new style of looking at things and comes with challenges too. So it's not a trivial architecture by any means. The decentralized, what I was really talking about there is the fact that teams have a need to be much more autonomous, to be able to run with a new business objective, run with a prototype, give something a try, fail fast, move on to something else. That kind of culture requires huge amounts of autonomy and responsibility given down to teams to allow them to choose the technologies they want to choose, the versions of that technology, and so on. And so decentralized ownership is really critical to that, and really is having quite an effect. And then ultimately, we also see this cloud native infrastructure, this move, as I say, especially to containers. And there is a lot of overlap between this and the benefits of microservice architecture. You'll see the same themes in here of agility and resilience and scalability. But there's more to containers than microservices, just as there's more to microservices than containers. They're overlapping concerns. One of the big deals in the container space really is the operational consistency that it provides. Where before every product had its own sweet way of doing high availability and scaling and load balancing and elements of security across its architecture and so on, a lot of that can be burnt in a much more declarative infrastructure as code kind of way and passed to an environment like, for example, Kubernetes through Helm charts and other policy files and things, so that we can achieve a lot of the things that we had to do separately in each individual product in a standardized way. So you have one set of skills to enable you to administer lots of different products. That's got huge advantages to an enterprise in terms of the skill sets they need to maintain. It improves the speed that people can skill up on new technologies because they don't have to learn the infrastructural aspects of it. And it's great for vendors like IBM too, because we can really focus our efforts on writing the really interesting part of the software. So making something that does integration do it better, rather than having to spend time working out how it does high availability and so on and so on. So container-based strategy really has a set of benefits that go much further and wider than you might initially expect. So nothing I've really said up to this point really talked about integration, and we're 10 minutes in already. Or we started a little late, so we're not too bad. Let's have a think about how these affect integration architecture. Now, I'm going to go back to the big picture slide of Agile integration architecture, but then show you how we're going to break that down over the next few weeks and talk about different aspects of that. So today I'm going to be talking about application integration itself. This is the enterprise service bus pattern and how that's changed over time. In future weeks, we're going to delve into, amongst other things, API and messaging as well, and we'll perhaps dip back to some of the discussions around containerization and things too. So, diving into application integration itself and looking at this change really from the centralized enterprise service bus pattern to something more distributed. So this diagram you see on the left here is obviously summarized, but it's the overall landscape that you see in most large enterprises. Tens, hundreds, thousands of systems of record along the bottom potentially being connected together asynchronously, probably through an integration hub with files and messages. And then above the systems of record you can see synchronous exposure of web services and APIs within the company to enable us to write applications more quickly. So we started to do that in the early years of SOA to make it possible to write an application more quickly because we'd already done the integration perhaps for a previous project. And so each time we needed data out of one of those systems at the back, we could go to those services and collect the data in real time. Allowed us to write applications more quickly, also allowed us to eventually expose those APIs outside the company too, and allow our partners to experiment and innovate on the back of the data and function that we had available, and potentially we charge them for that, or perhaps we get an alternative monetary advantage of them making use of our capabilities. So summarized in no more than about 2 minutes, that's about 20 years of integration history, from hub and spoke architecture through service-orientated architecture, the red circle, the red rectangle rather, describing what the limits of the enterprise service bus pattern are in scope, and then talking about how that then moves up into exposing APIs outside the company and building new applications. So the challenge that people have faced over the last decade or so with service-orientated architecture and the centralized ESB is the fact that that's a single team of integration specialists, deep integration specialists, that are needed in order to produce a new integration. And so from the moment of saying, I would like to expose this data or function from my back-end system of record, customer information or orders, to actually getting an interface could be weeks or even months because of lots of factors, not least because they're probably quite heavily concerned about being safe about the way they introduce new integrations to that environment, because the central enterprise service bus may have hundreds or even thousands of other integrations on it as well. They may not be able to make use of some of the newest features of that integration engine because they can't upgrade it because they've got thousands of other integrations on it. And furthermore, as a team, they don't necessarily have a good knowledge of the data models of the back-end systems. So there's a lead time while they're getting to know and analyze the back-end data models and work out what the right way is to expose them. So the evolution towards this more agile style of integration tries to break down a lot of those problems. And the first thing we do, of course, is the most obvious one, which is, could we break up that integration hub into smaller pieces? Perhaps running them in containers, Docker containers, perhaps running them in a Kubernetes environment, for example, to orchestrate them together, and have each container having only a small number of integrations in it. It's probably not one, but maybe a handful of related integrations that can be changed together, or maybe they scale together, or they have the same resiliency model. But nonetheless, those individual containers can have whatever version they want of the software needed for the integration. So IBM Integration Bus, which has recently been renamed Connect Enterprise for version 11, IBM Integration Bus is version 10. You could move to new versions or new subversions and fix facts independently in one group of integrations from another, not having to wait for the other hundreds of integrations to move. So that certainly breaks down a lot of the speed problems, a lot of the agility in terms of being able to change things, and the resilience, being able to push out a new integration without having any concern that it could bring down other integrations, because we can't introduce a memory link into another container. The infrastructure wouldn't allow you to do that. So those two sort of aspects are certainly improved, but we can do better. We can do better still, because now that we've broken things out into smaller integrations and smaller pieces, we can then move those smaller pieces down into the control of the teams. They are, because they're running on these, go back to what I said about the benefits of containers, these operationally consistent pieces that anybody who understands how to run things in containers can run because it's just a black box, it's a container, you use the Helm charts to build it up into its topology, and then you run it like anything else you'd be running in Kubernetes environment. It's much more achievable for an application team to take on certainly the operation of these integrations, but potentially the creation of them as well. All they've got to learn how to do is how to build an integration. And of course, as it moves into the teams, then that has an effect on removing this kind of waterfall model of passing requirements to a central team, having to wait for them to build something, then come back and try it out, and so on. It takes out layers from the architecture and improves the agility. So that, combining that sort of fine-grained deployment with the decentralized ownership, we start to get to a model where people can move a lot faster in a more resilient style, and start to take much better use of the infrastructure lying underneath. So some really simple, powerful ideas coming obviously from microservice architecture. I mean, that's it's the same concepts, but we're not writing an application, which is what microservice architecture is focused on. We're just bringing those containerization and principles down into the integration space. We could go a step further. We could start looking at the microservice applications themselves and saying, well, actually, as I look inside this microservice application, I see a component that I need to build that needs to take data from maybe an event stream, push it into a database, having done some enrichment along the way, some transformation of data models. I need connectivity to these two different capabilities. That sounds an awful lot like integration. And it might be worth considering whether the integration runtime that we're using across the board there could actually achieve that objective. We've just talked briefly about products here. So, IBM Integration Bus has supported in Docker since 2015. We provide Helm charts that you can build out topologies with it, scale, load balance topologies. We anticipate that many customers in a short frame of time will start moving towards that model. Certainly many are already doing the fine-grained deployment, and some have already done decentralized ownership as well, especially in development and test, and some in production as well. So the benefits that people are seeing are enormous. So moving to that model of having much more fine-grained integration is very, very common. Seeing it actually, as they see on the far right, as part of a microservice application sometimes causes some questions, because it's quite often said that you shouldn't have an enterprise service bus in a microservice application. Well, that's absolutely true, but bear in mind that an enterprise service bus is that heavily centralized piece that we're seeing on the far left there. So that's a pattern of use. It's an architectural pattern of use. The integration hub itself is not an enterprise service bus. The integration hub, IBM Integration Bus, or AppConnect Enterprise as it's known now, can be used in many different ways. And another way of using it is in this much more fine-grained way, as just an individual tool to tackle an individual integration problem. And we've been building towards using it in that way for many years now. The runtime is a very different dependency-free runtime that starts and stops in seconds and runs in a disposable way, just like any other component, like a microservice component. So certainly possible, technically possible, to use it in the style we're talking about on the far right as well. So that gives you a quick run through of the different sort of styles of use of the same integration runtime gradually being moved into a more and more fine-grained and decentralized style. What I haven't talked about is the grey bars that are on the far left are described as exposure gateways, and moving towards the right, changing in various styles. That's the how do we expose these services and APIs? And really that's a conversation about how SOA and service registries have moved towards API management, and what facilities API management provides, and how that's being affected by these agility, decentralization, fine-grained effects that we're talking about. So that's certainly a topic for another week. And also you'll notice the dotted lines on the diagram. They're representing the asynchronous communication. Why is asynchronous communication becoming so popular again? It's really coming back into the fore. And so we'll talk about those sort of issues in the future chat as well. But with that, I think that's taken us through some of the key aspects. As I've noted at the bottom there's some deeper webinars if you've got the patience to listen a little bit longer, and certainly e-booklets out there which we've got as well, which encapsulate a lot of the work that we've done over the years to describe all of these concepts. If you want to stay up to date with what's going on, the blogs noted towards the bottom are where we're publishing the new material to describe what we're doing in each of these different spaces. So with that's from my perspective, that's the end of today's presentation. But I certainly look forward to coming back on this channel to give you an update on some of the other dimensions.
Great, thank you, Kim. So folks, if you do have some questions that you would like to bounce off of Kim before we wrap things up today, you certainly have an opportunity to do so now. I do see a lot of requests in the chat for copies of the recording. So again, I'll be sharing a link for everyone that likes it, and you can just go to my WebEx account and retrieve the file from there. I think that's the best way to bypass some of the size limitations of folks' email servers. So you can expect that today. And if folks would like to take themselves off mute, you could absolutely do so. Oh, and one other thing, while we're doing that, I'm going to open a poll. So for those of you that had participated in the previous 2 weeks, we did start introducing that poll, where you can just provide us some feedback, and we'd love to continue that and understand what direction we should take this series moving forward. So if you could please respond to that, that would be great. Okay, so I do see one question. Looks like it just came through. Someone was asking, ESB integration hub may not be required in the future on the Agile integration module.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I know where that question's coming from. The sort of, okay, so if everything's exposed as an API, if when I buy a new application, it's exposed as an API, and APIs are sort of something that's straightforward, let's say, to communicate to using modern application integration techniques, and even from within libraries in applications, then do I need another tool to enable me to do integration? And I think we need to look to what integration tools provide now. They certainly used to in the past deal with low-level protocols and the challenges of how do I get to deep back-end systems, and how do I dig in, get COBOL copybooks out of the mainframe and things like that. And that's not the principal challenge that our integration software is necessarily solving now, although there are still those challenges out there. They're often dealing with things like bringing together complex data models. We've been getting more and more sophisticated with our data mapping capabilities, so that you can bring together data models in a visual way and understand how things are mapped, so that people can maintain them in the future. Coordinating multiple calls to different back-end systems. And indeed, connectors getting smarter as well. So we have a suite of cloud connectors. Most cloud SaaS applications have their own APIs, for sure, but the use of the APIs isn't trivial. And if you look at Salesforce as a SaaS application, it's got certainly more than 10 APIs you could go to get data out of it. And so which one should you use? How should you use it? How do you manage those sort of problems? What about if I want to poll for events and draw those back in? Well, that's the kind of value add that you're seeing from an integration engine now, to enable you to do those more sophisticated interactions. So I think it's worth understanding what value proposition integration hubs provide now, because it isn't the one that you might have been used to back in the days when they were used as an enterprise service bus.
So it looks like I missed one earlier on in the presentation. So Kim, I don't actually know whether you have visibility into the roadmap for WSRR. Someone's asking about that, roadmap of service registry as a component of the ESB pattern solution?
Yeah, I can talk to that. Service. Let's just go back in history a little bit. So, Websphere Service Registry and Repository, for anybody that doesn't know, was a way of cataloging the services that were exposed on an enterprise service bus that we brought into market a long time back. And at that time, the industry didn't really know what it needed from that use case. We created a very, very flexible product, but potentially quite a rich and complex product as well. In recent years, and quite a few years, we've been able to get a better understanding of that use case and redeliver that sort of concept through API management. So API management and the catalog capability within API management is really where we would turn to achieve the same thing today. So Websphere Service Registry and Repository still exists as a product, but it's not where we're putting our effort in now. We're putting new features into API management and moving people across to that for the broader range of functions. We believe we've brought across the primary use cases people are using, and we've been able to create something that's much easier to use, much more specific to the use of exposure of interfaces, both within and outside an organization.
Okay, I don't see any other questions at the moment, so I think this might be a good place for us to wrap things up. Just another reminder that Kim will be back with us next Friday, kind of continuing on this topic of Agile integration architectures, and we'll have a bit more focus on decentralizing integration. So if you found this to be an informative session, certainly encourage you to come back again next week. I think you'll find that equally valuable.
Thank you very much for your time today, guys.
Great. Appreciate it. So, folks, again, you'll see that link to the presentation recording shortly, and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.